Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome to the final video of the race weekend schedule. Of course, the race review here on this Monday night for the 2021 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. A Grand Prix that was very exciting, certainly for the first three quarters of the race. The last quarter was not bad at best, but it did really fizzle out, I think, mainly because of the overpowerful DRS, but that's just the way things are in Formula 1, I'm afraid. But what we're going to do in this race review, as we did in Bahrain, is go through absolutely everything. Why, really, where, or get into the reasons why, F1 finished where they did. Get into, of course, the battle for victory, the upper midfield teams, the lower midfield teams, and the battle there, and also some penalties in there, because you'll notice on the left-hand side the order is different to what I left it at the end of the race watch along yesterday, and we'll get into that later on. But yeah, that's what we're going to get into. Going to analyze a few incidents as well, and just get into it all. And hopefully you guys are having a good Monday, as best as Monday as you can. I mean, if you're a football fan, it's probably the worst Monday you could probably have, especially for me, as a fan of a certain football club who's decided to fuck off. But yeah, hopefully you're having the best Monday you can possibly have on what is a Monday evening for myself. Now, well, first, before we get into reviewing the teams and all of that, let's get into the finishing order of the Grand Prix, the official finishing order, and it is what it is on the left-hand side of the screen. So Max Verstappen won the race from Lewis Hamilton second, Lando Norris third. What a race by him. We'll get into that later on. Leclerc fourth, Carlos Sainz fifth, and then Ricciardo sixth. Gasly promoted to P7. Lance Stroll demoted to 8th place. Now, Stroll, the reason he was demoted was because, if you remember, in the race when Gasly was on wet tyres, when Lance Stroll was trying to overtake him, he went straight on at the Tamburello chicane and then stayed ahead. That is why Stroll got a penalty, and that's why he dropped behind Gasly. I have to say the punishment was correct. And then you got Ocon 9th, Alonso 10th, because Kimi Raikkonen got a 30-second penalty because when he spun on the restart of the race, right before the official, green flag racing period, of course he spun and lost a couple positions, I believe. And then, according to the FIA, did not re-enter the pits in his proper position or something like that. Might be incorrect on some parts of that. It's a very confusing rule, I have to say, and it is a bit bullshit, but those are the rules, and I think Kimi Raikkonen, unfortunately, just suffered a bit of bad luck there, spinning on the cold tyres and suffering that problem. So very disappointing, because he put in such a great drive. Of course, he started in 16th place and finished on track in 9th place. So instead, it's Ocon 9th, Alonso 10th, so Alpine get a double points finish somehow. And then you got Perez P11, Tsunoda P12, Raikkonen 13th, Giovinazzi 14th, Vettel 15th, and then Schumacher and Mazepin, the bottom two teams in the finishing order. Not teams, the drivers, you know what I mean. And then the retirements, Valtteri Bottas, George Russell, and Nicholas Latifi. So first, of course, we'll get into the battle for victory between these two on screen. Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Yet again, another great battle. And very up and down through the entire Grand Prix. And eventually, as I just said, won by Max Verstappen. And I have to say, on pure pace, I think Lewis Hamilton was probably the quicker driver. Because if you look in the wet part of the race, which is basically the first half of the race, Lewis Hamilton, definitely in the second half of that stint, really was a lot quicker than Max Verstappen and was really gaining. And if there was more laps, where they were on the intermediate tyre, I do believe Lewis Hamilton would have won the race, because he would have got the lead and probably wouldn't have been under that pressure that he was under when he, of course, went off at the toaster hairpin. And I think that did contribute heavily to his going off track, trying desperately to lap cars to get right up behind Max Verstappen, is at that time when they were just on dry tyres, he was gaining massively. So yeah, he had the pace, Lewis Hamilton, and it was in general a great battle on speed, and was still close. But ultimately, there were two moments that really decided it. So the first moment, of course, is the start of the Grand Prix. So, of course, Lewis Hamilton was on pole position. Sergio Perez was second and Max Verstappen third. And off the starting grid, Verstappen, I mean, if you watch back the start, I said it during the race watch along, that Verstappen got a great start because you could see it, see it on the grid. As soon as those lights went out and the cars began to pull away, Max was already right up behind Hamilton's rear wing, and a few seconds later was right side by side with him on the inside of the corner, again going down to the Tamburello chicane. And then, of course, at this point, they are side by side. Now, Lewis Hamilton, of course, does have the right to fight for position, but I have to say, if you look at the these camera angles, because of the way the Tamburello chicane is and how tight it is, with the slight contact they had, and then, of course, Hamilton going over the sausage curbs, and it did damage his front wing, which somehow did not cause Lewis Hamilton to lose a bit of performance compared to Verstappen. He was still able to go really quickly in the race after, say, lap 12 or 13 in the race. If you look back from this angle, and even the onboard cameras, because of the, I guess, trajectory of the corner and where Verstappen had his car placed, I mean, yeah, Hamilton had to go off track to avoid an accident, but there was never an overtake on. And I think, honestly, Lewis Hamilton was way too ambitious, thinking he was going to go round the outside of Max Verstappen. Maybe he was hoping that Max was going to make a mistake, and maybe hoping that there'd be enough grip around the outside. Of course, the grippier line, the off the racing line, not going towards the curb on the inside for turn 2. Maybe he thought that would help him, but at the end of the day, going around the outside of that corner when you've not got your car at least ahead, by 30 or 40%, it's going to be basically impossible to complete an overtake, at least cleanly. So I think Lewis Hamilton, again, way too ambitious trying to get a move done there, because simply against Max Verstappen at that corner, in those conditions, that overtake was never going to happen. And then, of course, Hamilton bumped up into the air briefly, which was, I'm sure, a very panicky moment for the team and himself, because he could have easily gone straight on into the gravel and basically had lost any chance of fighting for a podium or a race win right there. But he lived to fight another day and somehow again fought for the lead of the race from then on in. And then obviously once we got to the pit stops where they went from inters to dry tyres, like Nib said yesterday, Red Bull got it absolutely bang on with their strategy. Soon as the purple sectors by drivers who had already been on the dry tyres were being set, they brought him in, got him in, and even though the warm-up on that tyre was slow to start off with, of course, when Hamilton pitted a lap later, Verstappen maintained the lead and actually pulled a gap of 3 or 4 seconds over Hamilton. But then, of course, Lewis Hamilton pulled that gap back once they started to lap a lot of cars in a very tight piece of racetrack. Hamilton gaining, I think, 2 or 3 seconds in a lap and a half even. Dramatic gains in lap time there by Lewis Hamilton. And during the course of Hamilton and Verstappen, I wouldn't call it overtaking, but lapping those cars, especially in these conditions, when you're lapping cars, it really does have play a massive effect on your race result, because if you get held up too long, it can cost you massively. You have an incident, it can cost you, of course, massively. But if you do cut your way through with aggressive, decisive, basically overtaking of the cars, it can really greatly accelerate a good result for your Grand Prix. And at the Tosa hairpin, as you can see here, Lewis Hamilton, because Max Verstappen had just lapped Russell and the Williams and Valtteri Bottas just ahead in the Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton, for obvious reasons, was desperate to get ahead, but I think with the pressure being on of him, needing to lap these cars to get after Verstappen and get that race win, I think he I wouldn't say well, I guess you could say he probably did crack under pressure, but I wouldn't say this was a big cracking of, or big cracking under pressure, if you know what I mean. I think simply he, whilst being so focused and concentrated on lapping the cars and getting after Verstappen, kind of forgot about the track condition, because the reason he went off, as you can see here, Russell in the Williams, the two cars at the very back of that picture there, Williams in the lighter shaded car, is on the dry line, and you can see the dry line clearly that he's on. And Hamilton, right where he is now, is on the wetter, no grip, basically, line on the inside. And because of that, and because, again, he was too concentrated really on lapping the cars too quickly when he didn't need to take, I think, such a massive risk, especially considering he only went onto dry tyres like a lap or two before this. There was only going to be one result, and that was him in the barriers on the Tosa hairpin. Of course, broke his front wing, and that was, obviously, in terms of winning the race, it completely killed his chances, because even though the safety car came out and then the red flag, he would come out, in 9th place, or would start the race again in 9th place. So, yeah, a bad moment for Hamilton. I mean, he still does have the championship lead by a point, but given the pace he had, I think he'll be disappointed, because he could have won that race, because he had the speed, he was driving very well until then, but just with a moment of madness, lost it all, which is in races where it's wet and dry in the same Grand Prix, it happens to a lot of people. So he's not, the only one to have done that in this Grand Prix, or just ever in any wet, dry Grand Prix. But at the end of the day, again, it cost him massively. And I will say, I do not understand how the FIA didn't even investigate Lewis Hamilton for reversing back onto the racetrack, which he clearly did. He U-turned out of the gravel trap that you can see here and reversed back onto the track. And it wasn't like he reversed back onto a part of the track where literally no cars are going to go, or it's a piece of tarmac which is not actually on the track. It's kind of an escape road. He didn't do that. He literally reversed back onto the racing line, the entry point for the Tosa hairpin. So again, I'm amazed that I heard no investigation about that, because that was, I thought, a clear, hard and fast rule that you are not allowed to reverse on track. Knowingly reverse on track. I mean, if you reverse in the pit lane, you get disqualified immediately. So I don't understand why that rule would be different for on track. Again, the FIA stewards have been, since Charlie Whiting sadly passed away, they've been so bad. Not investigating things properly, not giving out penalties properly, not even investigating things like this, which should have at least been investigated. It's really poor. And I think Hamilton should have got a penalty for that. Kind of similar to what Perez got. A 10-second stop go, I think, is what Perez got, or a 10-second time penalty. That is what Hamilton should have got. Because, again, clearly not safe. And I know he did it because it was the quickest way he could get out of that gravel trap, and he didn't want to damage the front end of his car. But, you got to think of others. And again, the safety of everyone is more important than the race result of just one person. So, yeah, very not good to see at all. Not good to see. And again, I'm so surprised the FIA did not even investigate it after the Grand Prix yesterday. But Lewis Hamilton would finish in second place. Very good salvation job. Because, again, after that accident, I was thinking Mercedes, at least with Hamilton, were not even going to get close to a podium. And yeah, the red flag definitely saved their bacon quite a bit, because if the safety car and red flag had not come out, I'm not sure Hamilton gets back into the top 5 of the race, or even close, maybe not even within half a minute of a podium, because he was, I think, almost a lap down to the people on the podium when he came back out of the pits for that new front wing and all. So yeah, I think a good result considering the mistake that was made, but considering the speed that he had and how he was looking in the first, 30 laps? I mean, you're not going to win them all, but I think he'll definitely see this Grand Prix as a missed opportunity to further strengthen his lead atop of the Drivers' Championship, which I do stress again, he does still lead the Drivers' Championship by a single point, which we'll get onto later on, because of the fastest lap point that he achieved at Imola. But could have been more points on offer if that mistake was not made. Now, we're going to get on to next, the Valtteri Bottas and George Russell incident. Now, first off, don't really need to talk massively about Valtteri Bottas. He was shit. Let's be honest. He was absolute shit. Qualifying was really poor. He was looking good up until Q3. Then Q3 just completely bottled it. And in the race, he was, again, utter shit. And if he puts that in, a few more times, he's definitely not keeping that seat, because that race alone, for me, was maybe not a full-on sackable offence, but, I mean, it's got to be making Mercedes seriously consider, the man he crashed with in the race, to take his seat, because Russell's definitely performing at a higher level than Bottas is at the moment. There is no doubt that can be had about that whatsoever. So we're not really going to talk about his race, because it was so poor. There is just no point. But Russell having a great Grand Prix, and at this point he's up in P10. Valtteri Bottas is struggling on the dry tyres that he's only just put on, and going for on Valtteri Bottas, which he has every right to do, because he's racing for position, and of course, being in a Williams, if he can get an extra position, because Williams, of course, are desperate for a points finish. If he can get it, then he's got to, go for it, even if he's racing a car that really he knows he's not going to beat eventually in a race. So, had every right, did Russell, to go for it here. And I think this incident will definitely be one of note, possibly later in the season, in terms of Russell's future. But anyway, let's investigate the incident, because there's been a lot of talk. Russell earlier today actually apologised for his reaction, but I don't think that necessarily means he has dropped his criticism of Valtteri Bottas over his driving standards, which we'll get into now. And of course, Bottas, he said it was completely George Russell's fault, which, he's completely entitled to that opinion, as I'll show now, because it's still very hard to call who is to blame for what happened and who is in the wrong. Again, as I'll get into now. So you can see here, Bottas is clearly defending. He knows Russell very quick in a straight line in this Williams, and the DRS is very powerful. And then at this point, Bottas, again, he's clearly defending the inside line. There is no doubt about that, because you wouldn't be that far over to the left. You'd be a bit more towards the center of the track at this point if you were not defending position and you were just, continuing on the racing line as normal. And at this point, and it is a split-second decision, but Russell has obviously made the decision of, this guy's defending, I need to pull to the outside to get this move done. And then, as you can see, at this point, he goes to do that. Now, where Valtteri Bottas is, if Bottas stays where he is, Russell will go around the outside, and Russell will probably get the overtake done. Don't know if Russell would have beat Bottas. To be honest, the way Valtteri was driving, I think probably would have, because, Russell was ahead of Raikkonen and Alonso, Vettel for the whole race, so don't see why Bottas would have been special enough to get past. He couldn't even pass Lance Stroll, really. He did pass him in the pit stop phase and then lost position straight away because he was asleep when Verstappen lapped him. So, Russell at this point probably just going to sail around the outside as normal if Valtteri Bottas stays where he is. Now, that white line in the middle of the track, keep an eye on that. That's the most important thing to note when it comes to Valtteri Bottas. You can see now, again, Bottas furthest to the inside he could be, defending his position. That white line, by the way, is the pit lane exit line. And I want you to watch that again because it's very important in reference to Valtteri Bottas' positioning of his car. Because if Bottas stays where he is, he's not doing anything wrong by the rule book. He's just defending his position. He's made his move to defend, and Russell is going to make his move now to overtake, which he rightfully does. But now you can see, now Russell is pulled to the outside. Bottas now has his whole right front tyre over that white line. Now, meaning he has pulled not massively more over to Russell's part of the track, but is now pulled a lot more to the centre of the racetrack when he was to the inside of the racetrack. Again, I'll go back to the previous clip. You can see here, he's nowhere near that white line, and clearly, if you look from just this still image, you wouldn't think that Bottas would pull over to that white line because it's not like the track curves to the point where you need to go over that if you stay on that inside line. But at this point, again, Bottas has now pulled over to that white line. So Bottas, essentially, and Russell accused him of this, and I think rightfully so accused him of this, pulling over, or not pulling over, pulling to the inside of the track and doing what he called a Verstappen move to try and scare Russell, whilst Russell, of course, at a phenomenal speed, is trying to overtake. Now, what the Verstappen move is, and Max did this, I think, in 2016 a lot. He still does it kind of now, but I think he's kind of, he's tidied it up a bit, I think, as Max Verstappen, to the point where it's a bit safer than it used to be. I mean, it's still not great, that move that he does, but what the move is so if you're a car defending, let's say you pull to the inside of a corner like Bottas did, what you then do is, as Russell gets right up to the point where he's pulling out your slipstream to overtake, you then almost move with him to, again, kind of scare him, and then, you know, that kind of, it's almost like throwing a dummy at the other driver and making them think twice about the overtake they're going to complete. Now, I have to stress, and I'll go back to the previous picture. Again, these are still images, and I obviously can't show footage because if I did, this stream would be copyrighted in probably a millisecond. With Bottas on the inside line now, and then, you know, a second or 2 seconds at most later, he's now in the centre of the track. Again, the speeds they're going at, it is a dangerous move. It really is, especially where the track is still damp. And it is not a good move at all. Any driver that does it, it's not a good move at all, because again, you're really playing with fire. You're really taking an unnecessary risk with not just your life, but the lives of the marshals, the other drivers, everyone who could be hurt by a massive accident, which of course took place between these two. And again, with it being a damp track, it really doesn't help matters. So Valtteri Bottas, without doubt, as you can see here, clearly on the inside, and then now a lot more towards the middle at the last minute, or the last second rather. He is in the wrong for doing that. That is not okay whatsoever. If you defend your position on the track, you've got to make one move. You can't make one move and then, as the other one goes for their move, then pull into a different position. Because if you do that, in some instances, you are going to have what Martin Brundle would call an airplane crash. Because at these speeds, where you've got to make instant decisions and, you know, with incredible reactions, it's going to end up most times being a just horrific incident. I mean, luckily, no one was hurt with this accident that we'll get into in a moment. But again, it is a really dangerous move by Valtteri Bottas. I wish drivers would stop doing it, because at the end of the day, it's, you know, one day that move is going to really hurt someone or possibly kill someone. Because again, at these speeds, making last second moves I mean, we've seen it already where drivers have almost had a massive collision because of it, or, with this, a massive collision has happened. Again, one day, someone is going to get really hurt because of these moves, and any racing driver that does them should be penalised, or should be at least fined and warned heavily about, their conduct on track, because it is very dangerous to move at the very last split second when you're going at, over 300 kilometers an hour. It's so dangerous. So hopefully, after this incident, which I think has really proven that Verstappen move, they call it, again, is just so dangerous. Hopefully, drivers from now on will stop using that, because again, it's one day if they keep using these drivers, it's going to end really badly, and they're going to feel really guilty about it. One of them who pulls this off, and it ends up hurting someone very badly. But yeah, when Bottas moves into the middle of the track, the reason Russell spins is because you can now see he's on the damp part of the track, and then initially, just after this, he goes onto the grass, which I was unable to capture the exact point where he did clip the grass, but he already was in trouble because he's on the damp part of the track, and he's having to move the steering wheel. As you can see on this screenshot, he's steering partially left when he's supposed to be going straight, and he's on a damp part of the racetrack, so he's already in trouble with grip because he's having to react to a very last second move by Valtteri Bottas. And then the next, of course, thing to happen is Russell spins, goes into the side of Valtteri Bottas, and then, as you can see from Kimi Raikkonen's on board, the halo doing so much good work. I mean, look at what's coming at Kimi Raikkonen. Any one of those things without the halo could easily kill Kimi Raikkonen there, but it saved him. So anyone still who don't like the halo, just fuck off, basically. Just absolutely fuck off. The halo clearly doing its great work again. But again, this accident, really big accident, because of unnecessary, dangerous, moves on track. And it's got to stop, because, these cars, they're the quickest cars of all time. And again, with the speeds they're going at, despite there being the halo and everything like that, eventually one day it's going to catch up to someone, and I really don't want that to happen. No one does. Not even the drivers doing it. But I think sometimes they think too selfishly of themselves and their own, positions in the race. And they don't think, well, you know what, even though, of course, I desperately want to hold on to this position, I don't want to do something that's going to result in, someone else getting hurt that doesn't deserve it. So it needs to stop. It really does. Like I said, Max Verstappen doesn't do it as extreme anymore. He still does it a bit, and I wish he would stop doing it because he doesn't need to. He's too good for that. I mean, they're all too good for it, but especially Max Verstappen, he's too good for it, but it needs to stop. It really does. And I would say for this accident, I think I'd have to go Bottas slightly more to blame than Russell. I think Russell, though, does need to accept that he was a bit to blame in terms of the control of his car still, because at this point you can see he's not on the grass yet and is steering kind of left. So at this point it looks as though he's going to keep it on track, but then he goes onto the grass. And that was actually a driving mistake, him clipping the grass. Which I think, honestly, if he tried that another 99 times, he would have got it right and got past Bottas. So I think that was a driving mistake, but we cannot deny that it absolutely was helped by Valtteri Bottas' move back into the middle of the racetrack. And you can actually see from Kimi Raikkonen's on board, if you go and look at it, that Bottas does make a little jig towards the middle. Very small one, but it's very critical at that point. But yeah, dangerous incident, and thankfully no one was seriously hurt. Now let's get into Red Bull quick. Max Verstappen, great performance. I thought Max Verstappen did absolutely everything well. The start was great, managed the race superbly, did not crack under pressure, got everything right. His speed, once he got onto the dry tyres on the restart of the Grand Prix, was brilliant. It's exactly what he needed to do. Can't fault him at all. I still wouldn't give him driver of the day for the race day because I do believe that Lando Norris's performance was a tad better considering the machinery he was in and what tyres, what shape his tyres were in. The second half of the race on soft tyres. But Max was faultless, and this was exactly what he needed to do after Bahrain, where, of course, him illegally passing Hamilton off the track and all of that, controversy. But really, the reason they lost that race is because Red Bull kind of bottled it on strategy and didn't want to go toe-to-toe with Mercedes. But this Grand Prix weekend, they did. In fact, they took the lead on strategy and kind of schooled them. So, yeah, this is exactly what they needed. Also what Red Bull needed. Of course, Sergio Perez wasn't up there, as we'll get into in a second. But as a response, if Max Verstappen and Red Bull are going to be title contenders, this is exactly what they needed. Because going forward, at least for the next 2 races, I mean, Max, I think, again, next 2 races, you've got to look at him as the favourite, the slight favourite, at least for pole position at those 2 races. The race win, it's still be very hard to absolutely say who is going to be winning those races, because I'm sure Lewis Hamilton will have something to say about that. And Lewis Hamilton still, I think, is phenomenally quick. And I still think the Mercedes on race pace is probably just as quick, if not a tad quicker than the Red Bull, again, on race pace. But this man is looking good. As long as he can keep it together, Red Bull can keep it together, then there's no reason why he can't contend for the championship. Because after 2 races, we have seen that clearly Red Bull in qualifying trim have a car that is quicker. Not massively quicker, only a tenth or 2 in it, but it's looking a tad better in qualifying. And, because of their just overall car they have, if they can get a lot of pole positions this season, it will be pretty hard to stop them. So, hopefully, a good season ahead for Max. Sergio Perez, though, are so disappointed in Perez. The race just went from bad to worse. I mean, started the race off, lost 2 positions to his teammate, which wasn't a massive surprise, and Charles Leclerc as well. And then after that, I mean, as you can see from this picture here, it just got even worse. Went off the track during the safety car, lost a couple positions to, I think, Ricciardo and Gasly, I think, at the time, and then re-overtook them illegally under the safety car. Got a 10-second time penalty for that, which did affect him compared to, say, Charles Leclerc at the time in the race. And I think Lando Norris as well, who jumped him in the pit stop phase because Sergio had to take that penalty. So that was, that was bad. I mean, the reason he did that was, of course, the conditions were not good. He was on very cold tyres, but also, I think in a panic to get back on the track, he didn't really think, and that's why he retook the positions when he shouldn't have. And then, of course, later on in the race, after the red flag, he spun at the exit of the Villeneuve chicane, which was simply just him pushing too hard, getting a wheel on the damp patch and going off at a corner that basically sealed Alex Albon's fate at Red Bull at the end of 2020. But yeah, not a good race for Perez. Not what he needed. I mean, with the amount of chaos going on, he really needed to be finishing in 3rd or 4th place at this Grand Prix, especially with Valtteri Bottas being out of contention and Red Bull looking quick. But it simply never happened, and Perez was, I think, poor in the Grand Prix. I will say, though, if it was dry the whole race, I think Perez would have had a much better race, and I think Perez might have finished comfortably in 3rd place, but that doesn't excuse him, and I'm not gonna give him excuses here. He was poor in the Grand Prix, but at the end of the day, it was this man on screen winning the Grand Prix and winning that battle between Red Bull and Mercedes. But guys, let me know in the chat before we get into the midfield, what did you think of everything I've just talked about and Red Bull, Mercedes? Again, the start line incident between Verstappen and Hamilton spinning off, Bottas versus Russell. What do you think of Sergio Perez's performance? What do you think of Red Bull and Verstappen as a whole from the Imola Grand Prix weekend? Let me know in the live chat and also the comment section as well. I want to hear from you guys on there too. So yeah, I'll come to you guys now, see what you guys have to say. Let's have a look. Let me try and see where the start of a load of good comments here starts. Francisco says, "Hey Chazza, I agree completely. Stewards have kind of ruined the 2 races for me with all these inconsistencies." I can't pronounce your name, but I think you're from. Looks as it with the name there. Looks as though you're from. Was it Denmark or Norway? Can't pronounce the name though, because if I try, I will butcher it. So I'm not even going to try. But he says, "I'm incorrect. The rules state that it is legal to rejoin the track if done safely." And he says it does not specify in which direction. Now, just because it doesn't specify in which direction does not mean he should be, should get away with that. And I think we can definitely say that Lewis Hamilton did not rejoin the track safely. He did not. Reversing onto the racetrack on the entry of a corner when it's still a bit wet, that's not safe. And I think the majority of F1 fans would agree. Not that it matters. I mean, I'd still say that if I was the only person saying that, but again, the rules state that it's legal to rejoin the track if done safely. He did not rejoin safely, so he broke the rules. So, no. Absolutely no. Right, let me find some other comments here if I can. And by the way, and that's another thing I was going to mention when it came to Bottas and Russell, is another reason I want to heap some blame on Valtteri Bottas. Not necessarily for the incident, it's just he shouldn't be fighting him. He's in a works Mercedes. Why is he fighting a Williams for 10th place? So he shouldn't even be fighting him. So Valtteri Bottas, I mean, the reason he got knocked out of the race was not because of George Russell. It was because he put himself through being so, again, utterly shit. He put himself in a predicament where he was under threat from drivers who, no disrespect to Russell, he's not exactly used to racing people in the points all the time. And even in the Williams, he's not used to racing people in general in Formula 1 because, I mean, one, it's hard to overtake in Formula 1, and secondly, he's in a Williams, so he's not going to be exactly overtaking people a lot, except for the start of a race. Bottas should not be fighting him. He should be lapping him. But no, he's fighting him for position. So, and I'm not saying he deserves more blame for the incident because of what happened in the incident, because of that. I'm just saying he kind of deserved it simply because, he's in a part of the grid that he shouldn't be in, completely by his own making, completely, through a shocking performance. Right, let me look at some other comments here. Another comment here. Actually, the track has a slight left, so it looks like Bottas moved to the right, but he didn't. I have to disagree. He definitely did. It wasn't a clear move, but it was a brief move. I mean, I'll go back to it if I can. Not that one, or that one. So you can see here, and yes, it does curve to the left, but if he was going to stay to the left, he wouldn't have gone over that white line. He would have been not massively, but a bit further over to the left. He definitely let his car at least drift out to the right-hand side. As you can, if I get the pictures up, let me try and get them up. As you can clearly see here. Because look at all that gap to his left-hand side. I mean, of course, I know this is the right front and we can't see the other side of his car, but I guarantee there is a tad more room on that left-hand side for him to move on to. And that would have been the difference in Russell not being forced to, as you can see on his steering wheel, kind of correct his car whilst going at 200 plus miles an hour. Francisco says he clearly left space. He did one slight move and still left space. Should Bottas just let him pass? No. Bottas should not let him pass, but the rules clearly state you make your move to defend and you stay. You don't make your move and then at the last second move anywhere. You just stay where you are, because if you make a last minute move, again, you're going to end up having an accident most times, because it's incredibly hard for human beings, as we've seen in Formula 1, to make, decisions at that late stage with such speed to avoid a massive crash. So, Bottas, even though there was space there, if Bottas had not moved, at least Russell would have known, or wouldn't have had to, correct that steering wheel, like as you can see on screen, just briefly at the last second, which I think definitely contributed to his spin into Bottas. These things matter. Those differences, they do matter at those speeds. They really do. It's not as simple as just Bottas defended, Russell went to the outside, Russell then spun into Bottas. It's not as simple as that. Michael Wilson says, let them race. It's a dangerous sport. They know what they are getting into. Bring back refueling and old blocks. I completely disagree with that. I mean, I want them to race and all, but this is simply, this isn't down to the way the sport's gone. This is simply just, this is a new phenomenon with drivers where they do these very late moves. And I think Michael Schumacher as well is another driver who was very guilty of this, in moving a bit too aggressively or dangerously when racing rivals. And it's something that does need to cut out sport, because again, it can result in disaster. It really can. Infinite says, Chaz, is a wet part of the track with DRS open on slicks. Like, come on, what was Russell expecting? I understand that point, but there were still cars going onto that part of the track to overtake with DRS at that point, and they, didn't have a massive crash. Again, because Bottas made that late move, very slight late move, Russell briefly, again, if you look on the screen, he's not pointing the steering wheel straight because he's having to correct slightly the wheel, because he's seen and felt that Bottas has made that move. So he does have to adjust. He can't just continue on his path, because then he'll just end up hitting him anyway. So, when you're turning the steering wheel like that on a straight and a damp patch, I mean, I think that's still, would have happened. I don't think having DRS open as well, I don't think that makes a difference here. I think if there was no DRS in this situation, he still would have spun into him. Again, it was that very late, slight move by Bottas that forced Russell to kind of second guess what he was doing. Again, slightly correct his position. And then that's what forced him to clip the grass, go into Bottas to cause the accident. I still think Russell, Russell did make a driver error in clipping the grass. There is no doubt about that. But we cannot deny what led to that. You cannot deny what led to that. Russell didn't just pull out to the outside and clip the grass, without any reason. He's too good for that. And again, those slight moves that Bottas even did, they matter. They really do matter. And I know as well, technically, I guess you could argue from Bottas's point of view that it wasn't a clear movement to the middle of the track, and you can't, say that he absolutely 100% moved to a different position. But I don't think you can say clearly he was on the inside of the track, because again, the I guess factual analysis here shows he didn't. Lewis was deemed to have rejoined the track safely because he was in constant communication with his team. Well, of course his team's going to say he rejoined safely. If he deliberately crashed into someone, they'd congratulate him. So what his team thinks does not matter. It literally doesn't matter. What matters is the FIA, who are supposed to be, neutral, fair. If the team's opinion is that he rejoined safely, then great, but he's their driver. They're going to say that. Of course they're going to say that. And it doesn't matter when the next car would come. It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. I mean, that's the same argument that you could use for why in Turkey, when the tractor was still out on, or the edge of the track at the start of Q2, and obviously everyone got really upset about that, including myself, because that was just really poor, a real poorly run thing starting the session when there's still a tractor out there where the track was wet and cars could easily spin off and hit it. You can't. What's the point I was trying to make? I just had it on the top of my head, and then I forgot it. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember what it was. I literally just had it on the tip of my tongue, and now I've just completely forgot it. But I don't see how Lewis Hamilton is in the right there. I'm sorry, I don't see it. Again, yeah, his team, they'll say, yeah, he did rejoin safely, but they have to, really, because do you honestly think they're going to say, oh, yeah, he rejoined unsafely? Of course they're not going to say that. Of course they're not. Their job is to defend their driver at all times, basically. Yeah, though, at the end of the day, those are my opinions on the incidents. I mean, you guys can have your opinions, and I still think, I think the Bottas-Russell incident is definitely up for debate a lot more than the Hamilton one. I think the Hamilton one is almost a slam dunk, really. You can't reverse onto track. I'm sorry, you can't. I don't care if there's no cars, approaching at that exact second. I don't care. You cannot reverse onto the racetrack. That's a big no-no. With this incident, again, I think F1 is going to have a different opinion on this one because it is so equal for me. It's so kind of 50-50 or at worst, say 60-40 in either direction. It's still very hard with this, to see in the F1 community at least what the consistent opinion is, because I think F1 has just a massively different opinion on that. Right, I'll look at this final comment and then we'll get on to the midfield, because I have spent 45 minutes, or even slightly longer than that, on the top team. So let me get on to the midfield. Infinite says, Chazza, did you say the same when Verstappen spun at Turkey behind Perez and reversed onto the track then and rejoined? And it was a straight with a blind crest? I don't believe Max Verstappen reversed. No, pretty sure he didn't. Pretty sure he didn't. If he did, it was brief, and it was more so, I think a lot more so, it was actually his spin. I don't believe Max Verstappen knowingly reversed onto track, or on the track in general. Lewis Hamilton knowingly reversed onto track to get back onto the track. He didn't mistakenly or just happenstance his way back onto track in reverse. So those two things cannot be compared whatsoever. Not at all. Anyway, we'll move on from that and we'll get on to the midfield. So McLaren, great performance by them. 3rd and 6th, another great result. And they're not even that many points behind Mercedes and Red Bull at the moment in the Constructors' Championship, as we will get on to later on. But this man on screen, Lando Norris, what a Grand Prix that he had. A Grand Prix weekend. He should have qualified in 3rd place, but he rightfully so was penalised for a violation of track limits. And in the race, he was great. He really was great. He was faultless. Picked everyone off. Gasly, Sainz, then his teammate. He was clearly faster than his teammate and deserved really to get the podium, because all weekend he's been so good. And after his qualifying performance, he was always going to be, at worst, say, 5th place in this Grand Prix weekend. So great performance. I'm so happy for the guy because it's great to see another person now added into that mix at the top. Not the very top, because I still think the very top is still reserved for drivers like Verstappen and Hamilton, mostly because the McLaren just isn't quite there yet on pace. But, if Norris can keep this up this season and McLaren can improve a bit the car, Lando Norris finishing on the podium might become a bit more of a regular occurrence. Maybe not a very regular occurrence, but it will definitely... We're definitely going to get used to it, I feel, because this season so far, Lando Norris has looked great and has improved again on the year before, which is what he did in 2020, based on what he did in 2019. Because, again, another clear improvement from the guy. Pace in qualifying is one of the best on the grid at the minute. And his race performances are, again, one of the best on the grid. He's been arguably the best driver of the season so far after 2 races. So, great performance. So happy for the guy. And I hope that him and McLaren can keep it up going forward. For Daniel Ricciardo, good result considering he's still nowhere near, I think, full potential with McLaren. I still think he has quite a bit to go on his own comfortability and say performance at McLaren. I still think, we need to wait probably till Monaco at the earliest, I think, to where you start seeing, the real Daniel Ricciardo in this car. Again, he's still getting used to the team, still getting used to the car. I think he said the biggest difference between the McLaren and the Renault of last year is braking. So I think, and that's always been an important thing for him, of course, is braking, as you guys know. So I think he is still getting used to that. And just getting used to everything about McLaren. So really, if you look at his results so far, P7 in Bahrain and then 6th here, 14 points? That's a pretty good start for someone who's not quite up to speed at the minute. So I think Daniel Ricciardo, again, he's had a good start. McLaren have had a great start to the season. And I think McLaren definitely looking as though they're going to, at the minute, at least consolidate their position towards the front of the midfield. Maybe they won't be at the very front of that midfield pack at the end of the season because Ferrari are also looking very strong. And McLaren only scored a point more than them in the Grand Prix yesterday. But, and I'm sure I think Ferrari will probably improve a bit more than McLaren do over the course of the season because of that new rule about wind tunnel development that we now have in Formula 1, which is a good thing. I think, again, it'll be a tough fight with Ferrari, but I think McLaren definitely are at least going to be in the top 4 at absolute worst. So, looking good for McLaren. Hopefully, they can keep on building on it. And talking of Ferrari, let's go on to them now. 4th and 5th, I think it's a very good result. Very good as well from Carlos Sainz, who had a poor qualifying result. And in the race, despite going off track a couple times, his pace was just as good as Charles Leclerc, if not better at times. So I think Carlos Sainz is really having a very good start to life at Ferrari. Charles Leclerc was still very good. He was disappointed he couldn't get the podium. It was looking very likely for really the whole race up until the last 10 or 15 laps. So I can understand his disappointment. But again, 22 points for Ferrari. First 2 races have been so good compared to last year. So good. And without doubt, Ferrari are going to be fighting for either 3rd or 4th place in 2021, which obviously is a big improvement on 6th place in 2020. So definitely McLaren and Ferrari, the top 2 midfield teams. And like I said, Carlos Sainz, man on screen. Despite going off track a couple times, I thought he was very, very strong on speed. And as long as he can get qualifying right, because that's the only thing he's not got quite right so far, is his qualifying position. 8th in Bahrain and 11th in at Imola. If he can improve his qualifying performance, then he could beat Leclerc in races this season, no doubt about it. And I think these two, without doubt, even though I still think Ferrari are looking at Leclerc more so as the leader of the team because he's a more permanent feature of that team than Carlos Sainz is probably. In terms of speed and performance, these two are equal. They really are. There's nothing separating these two, which is great to see. But yeah, Ferrari looking good, and I think the next couple races, I think Ferrari are going to look even stronger. And as long as their drivers perform and their team does, 4th and 5th might be, again, a bit more of a regular occurrence this season. Now let's get into some of the other midfield teams. Aston Martin, what a weird day. Sebastian Vettel, of course, he had penalties and problems here and there. He went for the dry tyres too soon. Ended up finishing down in 15th because he retired from the race on the, penultimate lap. Just a real up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down race, really, for Sebastian Vettel, and ended up in the last few laps being especially down for him. And he clearly is not liking that car at the minute. Because, I mean, look where Lance Stroll has been this season. Lance Stroll finished in 10th in the first race and then 8th in the second race. Lance Stroll is clearly at the moment quicker than Sebastian Vettel, and Lance Stroll at the minute looks clearly the better driver right now at that team. There's no doubt about it. And if I was to predict the next race for Aston Martin, I'd have to go Stroll as the highest placed driver because Sebastian just doesn't seem to quite be there right now. I think that will improve as the season goes on. I think once we get to probably the Spanish Grand Prix, you might see a strong performance there. Say maybe a top 10 starting position there or something like that. And then Monaco and Baku, I think you'll see Vettel start to kick in gear. But definitely for the next Grand Prix, I think Stroll is still clearly ahead of Vettel. Clearly a lot more used to and liking this car. So yeah, Vettel struggling, definitely for sure. We'll say though, Lance Stroll, despite his penalty for overtaking Gasly, he has, like Norris, faultless this season. He's been great. The Aston Martin car has not been good enough, really, for points finishes at all this season. So for him to already get 5 points on the board, and he is really at the moment carrying that team and making them at least relevant for 5th place in the Constructors, which they're only 3 points behind at the minute after 2 races. Yeah, he's been great. He really has. And you've got to say he's been so far, I know it's only 2 races, but so far after 2 races, he has been one of the top 5 drivers of the season so far. Again, faultless. He's getting the best out of the car and looks massively improved on last year. So I don't see how you could not count him in there. Again, great so far, and again, proving my former self massively wrong, and I can happily say that I am a bit of a fan of Lance Stroll now because he is actually, at the minute, really good, and he's clearly an asset to have in your team. And yeah, his dad's the owner, so what? He's good enough to be in that team, and at the minute, he's better than Sebastian Vettel. Maybe not over their careers. I mean, of course, Lance Stroll has still got another 15 years probably in his career, so we'll see what Lance Stroll can do. But at the minute, Lance Stroll is better than Sebastian Vettel. And yeah, Vettel is, he'll need time to get used to the car, but you cannot deny at the minute Lance Stroll is the better driver, which I did not think for a million years I'd be saying. Next up, AlphaTauri. Good result considering it was a calamitous race, to be honest. For the AlphaTauri team, Pierre Gasly started up in 5th place, started on the wet tyres when everyone else, bar 2 or 3 others, was on the inters, and it paid off initially, but then it really didn't, as everyone basically passed him. Then he dropped down to the back of the grid. Gotta say though, the pace of the AlphaTauri in the dry was really good because he fought his way up from about 14th or 15th up to 7th place and had the pace really to beat Daniel Ricciardo as well, if given the chance. So Gasly's pace was really good. AlphaTauri's pace was really good. And Yuki Tsunoda, even though he started at the back, finished in P12, I thought his pace was really good. But yet again, I know it's only 2 races, but yet again, AlphaTauri, despite having a really quick car, cannot for the life of them capitalise on it. They've only scored 8 points in 2 races, with the pace of the car they've got, they should be on at least 20, if not 25, and be not too far off Ferrari and McLaren. But instead, they are only on 8 points, as I said. And they are in 5th in the Constructors, which would end up being a good result for them at the end of the season. But, you know, at the minute, again, look at the Constructors table. They're already 30-something points behind McLaren after 2 races. And McLaren, the driver lineup they have and the pace of the car they have, I mean, are McLaren going to drop that lead to them? Probably not. Are Ferrari going to drop the lead they have to AlphaTauri? Probably not. So it already looks over in terms of 3rd or 4th in the Constructors. And now their fight really is Alpine, Alfa Romeo, and Aston Martin, possibly Williams, if Williams can improve during the season. He looked pretty good in Imola, you know, for the rest of the positions. So, again, first 2 races, I think, ultimately have been disappointing for AlphaTauri. And I'm hoping very soon we can get a Grand Prix weekend where they are quick, obviously, but they get the result that the pace deserves, because so far this season they really have not. Alfa Romeo, big shame for them. Both their drivers, I think, are very unlucky. Again, Kimi Räikkönen punished for that safety car infringement. He was great. 16th he started, of course, finished in 9th on the track, but again was penalised. And as well, Antonio Giovinazzi, so unlucky, was up in 8th or 9th place, I think, when he had this problem. Something had to be tore off the rear brake duct, I think some debris or something, and that destroyed his race. Because if Raikkonen Raikkonen was going to get that penalty, then Giovinazzi would have finished in 9th place, which would have been a great result at his home race. And I think Giovinazzi, like Raikkonen, they already deserve points this season. If you look at the first 2 races, they've had the pace for it, and they've driven well enough for it. They just haven't had the luck. So yeah, that's really, again, disappointing. The only thing I could really say for this weekend for Alfa Romeo is they probably should have had a better starting grid position, because that probably would have helped a bit for any penalties or bad luck. But I think Alfa Romeo will score points there in the next race or 2, because they've got a very quick race car. Just not got the luck at the minute. The only thing, though, again, that needs improving is the pace over a single lap. For Alpine, I think Alpine are very lucky to finish 9th and 10th and get 3 points, because they didn't deserve 3 points. The drivers did okay, but again, the pace of the car is still really poor. It's a poor race car overall. I'd say in the race, it was probably the 7th or 8th quickest car out there. I mean, they were toiling around at the back of near the back of the field with, you know, Sebastian Vettel at points. And again, it looked horrible for this team. And somehow they've gone and claimed 3 points. But at least they've got something on the board, because I didn't see them getting any points on the board until quite a bit into the season. So at least that's something. But I still think Alpine are in trouble, because despite a couple of good qualifying performances by their drivers, that car, ultimately, on most Grand Prix weekends where we'll get mostly normal races, that car will simply not be good enough. The reason they scored points again is because it was a bit of a crazy race. There was a bit of rain in there. You know, it wasn't a normal race. But when we have most races this season where it is normal, that car just ultimately is not good enough. There's nothing really to it in a special way. So, yeah, good result, but still a lot of work to do, I think, for that team. And the final team, Williams. I think Williams really should be disappointed, because they had the pace, you know, with certain people struggling. I think with Russell, definitely, they had the pace to get their first points finish since 2019. But of course, didn't happen. Big shame. But I think, again, with that new wind tunnel development rule, that the lower down in the Constructors you finish in the previous season, you can develop more the next season. If Williams really concentrate a lot more on this season, which they probably shouldn't, because next year is really important, but let's say they concentrate a lot more on this year than other teams are, by the end of the season, especially with Russell in that car, Williams could score points a few times. because they're not far away. I mean, in qualifying, Russell was only a tenth of a second away from getting into Q3. So, you know, with a bit more development compared to other teams to that car, I don't see why Williams can't get points this season. If they don't get points this season, then they really should just liquidate, because if they're not going to get points in this car, even on days where other teams or drivers are flailing around and basically begging them to score points, if they can't do it then they're never going to, you know, bloody do it, are they? So I think, even though, again, double retirement, that's not good, positive weekend, definitely, for the team. But let me just look at the chat quick to see what you guys have to say about the midfield teams. Crystal Racing, great to see you, says stupid penalty by the FIA for Kimi. What poor communication from Michael Massey over Kimi's position for the restart. Utter bullshit. Yeah, it was a bit poor there, but I will say the rule itself was, you know, was very confusing when I looked at it earlier, when I did, you know, started doing my research, I guess you could say, for this stream on the penalties and whatever. So I think, yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but I think because of the way the rule is, you probably have to just go, you know, with the FIA on that one. Crystal Racing saying the rules state a driver may retake his position. Does that mean it's mandatory or optional for Kimi to return to P8 for the restart? I mean, the fact it was a rolling start instead of a standing start, I was hoping it would be a standing start, to be honest, but again, it was a really confusing rule. They wanted him to, because I was sure during a safety car you're supposed to, that's the thing, was it a safety car that, you know, that lap or two that they did before the restarting the race? Was it a safety car period, that, or was it a formation lap? Because technically Kimi did not drop to the back of the grid, so I guess if they're counting that as a formation lap, then yeah, Kimi should have retook his position. But if it's technically a safety car period, then Kimi should have lost those positions because he went off the track. And if you go off track, then the other cars do have the right and permission to pass you on track, because if you're not on track, then even if it's a safety car, you are allowed to be overtaken. Thomas, when do you think Latifi will score points? I can't say because I don't know if it'll happen. I think Russell will. I think Russell could score points at Monaco, to be honest, because I think if we get a bit of madness around there, and with the way, you know, how good he is, which around Monaco that would show, I think you could get Russell scoring points there. But with Latifi, I don't know. I really don't know. Right, let me see if there's any other comments here. Francisco says, imagine if Kimi had regained the position and got a similar penalty to Perez. Again, was it a safety car period or was it a formation lap technically? That's what's confusing. If it's a formation lap, that it was, then Kimi should have retook positions and he would have been fine. But if it was a safety car period, then Kimi should have just stayed where he was, which I think that's why he did, because the safety car was leading the cars out on track. So I think technically speaking, it should be a safety car period. But again, the rule was confusing. It was confusingly applied. Again, disappointing for Raikkonen, but he will score points, I'm sure, this season in what might be his last season. But then again, we've been saying it might be his last season for about 10 years. So we'll see on that. Anyway, let me get on to now, and I'll try and get rid of this order. Let's get on to the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. So Lewis Hamilton does lead by a single point from Max Verstappen in second. Lando Norris in third. Charles Leclerc fourth. Valtteri Bottas down to fifth. Bottas is basically out of it already, especially after that performance. Carlos Sainz is sixth, and Ricciardo is seventh. Perez eighth. Gasly ninth, and Stroll in 10th. And then for the Constructors' Championship, your top 10. As you can see, the top 4 is pretty close after 2 races. Mercedes lead on 60 points, only 7 points clear of Red Bull. McLaren, 12 points behind Red Bull in 3rd. Then Ferrari only 7 points behind McLaren in 4th. So McLaren and Ferrari, definitely the battle is on. Is on there. And then AlphaTauri 5th on 8 points. You can see again the massive gap between those teams. McLaren and Ferrari to the rest. And then Aston Martin 6th on 5 points. And Alpine 7th on 3. And then the final 3 teams. Alfa Romeo, Williams and Haas. In that order, because of course Alfa Romeo so far have the highest finishing position without a point. And then obviously again Williams and Haas have 1. But definitely it looks as though to me it's McLaren versus Ferrari for 3rd, Mercedes versus Red Bull for 1st, and then AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, Alpine, and Alfa Romeo fighting over 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And maybe Williams can get in there as well. Again, like I said earlier, with development. But let me just... no, not that. Let me just get this back up. There you go. I think what I'm going to do now, guys, is finish the stream because I've basically done what, just over an hour. So I think I've basically covered all bases here. I just want to let you guys know, though, quickly of the schedule, the channel schedule going forward. So, just like the gap between Bahrain and Imola, there will be a bit of a gap until the next video or stream. So the next stream or just anything that is planned is what? The Thursday before the Portuguese Grand Prix, which would be Thursday the 29th of April, I believe it is. 28th or 29th of April. That'll be the next video or stream, and that will be the preview for the Portuguese Grand Prix at Portimao. Then, of course, the race weekend schedule will remain the same. Practice 3 watch along, I think midday on Saturday, UK time, and then I think 3 p.m. UK time for qualifying, and then it's probably 7 p.m. UK time will be a race preview on the Saturday on the 1st of May, and then on the Sunday, the 2nd of May, race watch along, of course, at half an hour before the race starts, which I think the race starts at 3 p.m. UK time, so you can work that one out. And then again on the Monday, it will be another race review. This time, it'll be at 7 p.m. when it's not clashing with big coverage about the football situation. That's why, basically, I suspended the start of the stream, because that, I didn't want to clash with that, and also because I was checking the news all the time, I was a bit slow setting the stream up, and obviously I want to make sure I get the stream set up properly and that I cover all bases and don't get anything incorrect factually or anything like that. Make sure I do my research, basically. So that's why there was a bit of a delay there. But yeah, that's the schedule going forward. So next stream is in about 10 days from now, I believe. Again, though, guys, I know you guys were saying, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, please do recorded videos. Those are coming. Trust me, they are. I'm just waiting for there to be enough races gone for me to start making them, because I don't want to make two or three, recorded videos on, the title fight or whatever, when we still don't know for sure what the battles are going to be. And I'm waiting until after the Spanish Grand Prix, which is the weekend after the Portuguese Grand Prix, to really start making that content, such as, again, title fights between McLaren and Ferrari, how drivers are doing, all of that. So there will be recorded videos coming. Don't worry, guys. It will be coming to the channel. Just not yet. So give it probably another month, I would say, and they will probably start to arrive on the channel, say, once every fortnight, for a bit, say, during the first or the next 2 or 3 months, something like that. But yeah, next stream video will be in about 10 days' time, and hopefully you guys will join me for that weekend as well in Portugal. Just to say again, like I've said all weekend, thank you very much for tuning in and everything like that, especially yesterday. And as well, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Because again, we will be doing qualifying and race watch-alongs and just coverage in general for every race weekend in 2021. And you guys seem to be really enjoying the content and the quality. So again, if you are new and you haven't subscribed, make sure to do so and hit the notifications bell. Don't forget to smash the like button as well, and as well share this video everywhere you can and the channel everywhere you can as well. Comment down below what you thought of this video, and comment down below what you thought of the incidents in the Grand Prix that I covered. And don't forget to join my Discord server, as there's almost 500 people in there. So if you want to debate Formula 1 and talk about it with other people, some like-minded, some not, make sure to join that. And also, that's a great place to be notified as to videos and streams, so make sure to do it. Join that if you want that type of situation in your life. And as well, if you want to send me an email for any reason, it's in below in the description, chazzahdf1@gmail.com, if you want to send me an email. But yeah, until about 10 days' time for the preview for the Portuguese Grand Prix of 2021 in the Algarve in Portimao. And after what has been another great Formula 1 weekend, it has been me, ChazzaHD. Goodbye.